Hey folks, Randy Newberg here with another episode of Hunt Talk Radio. I'm here in my home in Bozeman, Montana with my special guest. Any of you who had your hunting partner come home for a week, like I did, my son Matthew's here, celebrating his 26th birthday today. Happy birthday, Matthew.
Thanks.
And he's home visiting us for a week, and I just got back from Alaska. From a black bear hunt, and I head to the NRA show in Louisville, Kentucky tomorrow. So I told him, let's sit down and crank out a podcast, and he said, yeah, let's do that. So we got all kinds of things we're going to talk about here. We're done with the political stuff. I appreciate you guys listening in for the 2 podcasts that we did on political topics. I know some of you said, well, gosh, I don't live in Montana, so it's not that appealing to me, and I get that. But you all know that I use my platforms in a pretty heavy political way, and I hope that all of you who have platforms or that you listen to other platforms, I hope you will encourage them to get involved in the politics of whatever it is, public land issues, hunting issues. I mean, right now, I look at Corey Jacobson and Ryan Hatfield and those guys over in Idaho, and they're fighting a big battle right now with the politics of their governor not reappointing 2 very hunter-friendly commissioners to the Fish and Wildlife Board, Fish and Game Board over there, commission. And those guys both have big platforms, and it's encouraging to see Corey and Ryan use those platforms to try create change for the benefit of their audience and for hunters. So I'm hoping that all of us in the hunting world, when we have these kind of platforms, it comes to me, at least to me anyhow, comes with the responsibility of being involved and doing something about it. So anyhow, Matthew, what do you got for an outline here? Am I going to have to tell Alaska bear hunting stories, or did you grab a bunch of stuff off Hunt Talk and get a bunch of member questions?
I think we have a bit off Hunt Talk to go over today, but first, do you want to talk about some of your sponsors of the podcast here?
Yeah, I think we'll get that out of the way right away. And I'm going to try connect this later on in the podcast, but there's 2 of these sponsors who are going to be really important to what I do when I start doing my scouting this summer, what I call e-scouting. From my desk. And actually, I've started a thread out on Hunt Talk, our forum, just yesterday, and said, hey guys, I drew this really cool tag that I did not expect to draw in Utah, and I've never been there. You guys want me to start a thread and show how I go about e-scouting or desk scouting from home, having never set foot there. And 2 products that sponsor this podcast that I use heavily in that effort are the Go Hunt Insider and Onyx Map System. So all of you know that gohunt.com, go there, and if you click on their Insider, they have a special promo code for you guys who listen to our platforms. It's Hunt Talk, HUNTTALK. And if you go and click on the Insider and type in the promo code Hunt Talk, you're going to get a free Gerber scalpel blade knife, the Vital. It's the knife that we use. And if you out on our YouTube channel, Randy Newberg Hunter, we've been doing this series called Elk Talk, showing people how to apply for tags. And now that we're through the tag applications, now we're talking a lot about tactics and finding elk. But when we were doing the segments about how to apply for tags, the resource that I use is the Go Hunt Insider. So I don't say that for any reason other than it's some of the best money you're going to spend. If you go out to gohunt.com, they have a bunch of great free articles and stuff out there. And then if you subscribe to the higher level service, it's worth every penny of it. And then the other sponsor is the Onyx Maps guys. A lot of you knew them as huntinggpsmaps.com. Same company. They make the new Hunt app They just rolled it out, I think, in February or March. And I think if you go out there and look, it's all about hunt smarter, and it's putting everything in the power of your hand. It's all of your information can be stored on the cloud, can be retrieved from there, retrieved from anywhere, and all of the services that we used to rely upon, like these little microchips for our GPSs and stuff. You get all that and a whole lot more. It is invaluable to me because I hunt a lot of areas that have public-private interfaces, and the Onyx map system lets me know where those are, lets me get the aerial views, the surface ownership views. I can go in, import, export, do everything I need to do with it. And I know they have a promo code for us there. What is it, Matthew? It's Randy 16, I think.
Randy 16, yep.
Yeah, and so if you go to the Onyx Maps website and you want to get the new Hunt app, if you use promo code Randy, R-A-N-D-Y 16, I think it's 20% that they give off for you just using that promo code. So go do that also. And then the last sponsor of this podcast, you heard 2 podcasts ago, we had Damon Bungard from Orion Coolers on the podcast. Great guy. We just took a bunch of those Orion Coolers to Alaska last week. We lived out them for a week, me and 2 camera guys. And everybody who sees those coolers is like, whoa. Not only are they these funky colors, which grabs your attention at first, but they are so stout. They are so durable. And when you start using them, you're like, holy cow, that's what this is for. Why didn't I think of that? Why didn't the other cooler companies think of that? So all I can tell you is go to orioncoolers.com and check them out. They are the best premium cooler that's out there. And I've been using them now for over a year, and they're as good as anything I've ever found. And I guess with that, Matthew, we got the formalities out of the way. Where we want to start with this thing?
All right. Well, I'm kind of the guy that does a lot of the behind-the-scenes digital YouTube, Facebook type stuff. And so I think it's probably a good idea for us to give everyone a little bit of a look into what we've been doing and what we have laid out for the future. Then going off of that, we also have some news that came off of the internet of some tours in Yellowstone that we should probably talk about.
Can we get into that one first?
Yeah, let's go for
it. So I get off the plane from Alaska, and all of you any of you who are in the outdoor world read the same thing. I live outside of Yellowstone Park here, about 80 miles away, and so every summer we get inundated with people who come to Yellowstone and do stuff that those of us who understand the natural world, we just shake our head. Earlier this year, I think like almost a month ago, some couple from Taiwan, I think it was, had their daughter go and stand next to a bison bull to get her picture taken, and she got gored. And I mean, it happens every year. Well, the item that you're referring to, Matthew, is this the one about the French-Canadian couple who put the bison calf in the back of their SUV?
Yeah, that's the one.
I mean, I get that they're concerned about wildlife, and I guess I appreciate that people are concerned about wildlife. But what it means to me, or how it kind of shakes out for me, is the rest of the world did not grow up in the natural world, I guess, with a close connection to the natural world like I did. I mean, Matthew, you grew up here in Montana, so it's, for you, it's kind of a bit of the same. You shake your head and say, what the hell is somebody thinking? And I don't know what, those of you who read it are probably laughing also, but for me, it also is evidence about how much we really are the minority in society today.
Yeah.
Where you went to college, Matthew, you went to college in New York, and now you're getting your master's on the East Coast still. You probably realize it more than I do.
Yeah. So one of the things that really struck me about this is this actually was trending on Facebook, and I had a bunch of friends from North Carolina that started posting about this, and none of them had actually been to Yellowstone, so it was a little bit of a surprise to see this show up as often as it did on my Facebook. And so it's really one of those things where it's kind of a far-reaching thing, and it gets into the digital realm of, hey, people are going and experiencing the outdoors, but they've seen photos on the internet, and they may not know exactly how to go and interact with the outdoors.
Right. What we take for granted of, you would never walk up to a new mother bison and say, I'm going to take your calf. I mean, all of us know that's a good way to get killed.
Yep.
But so those on your news feed, you think they understood the gravity of the danger this person put themselves in?
Well, I think it's important to give a little background for the people who didn't actually see the article. The couple took the bison calf and put it in their SUV because they thought it looked cold.
Cold, yeah.
And I mean, maybe it looked cold, but still, what's the Forest Service going to do about it? Put a bison blanket on it or something? But
yeah.
The follow-up to this is that the calf wound up having to be euthanized because the mother rejected it, right, and it became a little too chummy with the other tourists in the park. And so that was the other part that caught a lot of attention on the internet, was the euthanization.
Right.
And the responses that I saw range from, oh yeah, the tourists were stupid, to, oh, why would they do that to this poor animal?
Yeah.
And that again really speaks to the kind of disconnect between what needs to happen in order to keep the park animals healthy and going strong, and what needs to happen to make sure the tourists are safe, and all sorts of different aspects that play into this.
Yeah. To me, though, it just continues, and I get these reminders all the time. A lot of them are news feeds. And all of you outside of the world here by Yellowstone don't get all of these news feeds probably, but some of the crazy stuff that we hear about, it just, your first response is, what an idiot. Like you said, Matthew, what are they going to do? Get a bison blanket for it? I mean, bison calves have been surviving
spring in Montana for a long time.
Yeah, since long before the Europeans showed up here, and but yet, I think a lot of people in my generation, I'm 51, you're 26. My generation, a lot of them experienced or got their information about the wild world, the natural world, through TV. Is it safe to say your generation is getting that through social media and other stuff, and that creates this really, like I think you said, disconnected?
Yeah. So I think that the internet is typically a very good resource, and for the people who really want to go and learn about things, I think that it creates a very good environment for them to learn things. I think it's the people who fail to really investigate what they're doing that are the ones that cause problems. Like maybe they see a photo of all the wildlife on Instagram or Facebook or something, and they say, oh, I want to go there. And they don't realize the implications of, if I go there, that means I probably shouldn't go pet the grizzly bears.
Yeah.
And it's an example of the information's out there, but maybe it's not reaching the people in the level that it should.
Do you think they have any context by which to associate what they see versus what reality is?
I mean, I don't know. There are definitely some people who I think are very intelligent that are lacking in some of the common sense divisions. Mm-hmm. And to them, they might just assume, oh, it's a park, it's very highly organized, all of these animals must be domesticated, and therefore they're not dangerous, when in reality that's not even close to the truth.
Yeah. I guess when we think about, okay, That's the level of connection and understanding these people have to the natural world, the natural cycles, the life and death that happens in the natural world. They are also the people who represent the majority of Americans, or the majority of the world.
Right.
Which it is a further eye-opener for me that as I'm trying to communicate a message in the hunting world, I'm talking to a very small part of the world who I can relate to without a lot of depth and detail because they have the life of context to understand it. But they're a small sliver of the pie.
I mean, if your exposure to wildlife is going to a park and feeding the birds or watching a squirrel bury a nut or something, if you just assume all wildlife is that tame, you're probably going to wind up in some trouble if you go to Yellowstone or the backwoods of Montana.
And I think one thing about abundance of wildlife in our country, we went from this, there is none, or it was scarce, to the great recovery we all talk about and we should be so proud about, which we are. But now, earlier today, there was the discussion about suburban Washington, D.C. whitetails laying in people's yards. That is not a natural situation in a natural world. So I don't think it's that out of reality for the person from Washington, D.C. who drives through suburban wherever it is and sees deer laying next to someone's lilacs and thinks that's a natural condition because that's what they've seen all their life.
Mm-hmm. I mean, in a way, it's become the natural condition. Like if humankind is really just having that much of an impact on the environment, then if the animals are adapting to it, then hey, that's the new status of nature.
I think you're right. And that's the context by which a lot of people look at this. So they think, all right, well, the white-tailed deer living in the hedge behind the house here, they aren't afraid of me. And, I've went and petted their fawn before maybe, or whatever it might be. Or they've had to kick it away because it tried to come and eat the tomato plant that they put out in the spring, or whatever, little garden they tried to grow. When they come to a place like Yellowstone Yellowstone's really not that wild of a place. I mean, it is, but it isn't. Yellowstone's as domesticated of wild country as you're going to find, just because you got 6 or 7 million tourists a year going there. But I don't know. I guess it shouldn't surprise me when you have the example we're talking about with Washington, D.C. suburbanite deer giving people a context of what the natural world is that's really not that natural.
I mean, the bison are so fluffy, they can't be dangerous, can
they? Well, and I think that is another thing. Bison in America, if we want to just talk about that for a minute, the true genetic strain, pure strain bison is very rare in the United States. We have them in Yellowstone, have them in the Henry's Mountains in Utah, now in the Book Cliffs in Utah, some of the Alaska herds and some of the Canadian herds. The rest of the bison the world see are a mix of cattle and bison. And they're standing behind fences. The majority of bison in this world are highly domesticated. So I guess it's not that unusual if you're a tourist and you come to Yellowstone. You drove, across South Dakota or wherever, and you saw bison out in the, all huddled up in the corner of a pasture. And so you think, well, what the heck? I petted a horse before. I'll go and rub the ears on this bison. Maybe none of these really should be that unexpected because of how we've built our interaction with what used to be wild animals.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, part of it is just the human nature of putting themselves in what they perceive as the same amount of risk. I think it's, what's it called? Risk homeostasis, where as you make people feel more protected, they are more willing to take on additional risk. And so in some fashions, having Yellowstone be a place that's highly regulated and say you should only walk here, you should only do this, you should only do that, makes people feel safe and kind of lulls them into this false sense of security that, oh, I can go pet the bison, I can go, take a selfie with this black bear cub. Like, there's a lot going on.
What was that called? The risk what?
I think it's called risk homeostasis. It's the idea that as a human species, we like to put ourselves in the same amount of perceived risk at any given point in time.
With perceived risk being far different than actual risk. And so there's a number of studies with this. There's a theory out there that if we took football players and we made them not wear helmets, they would fear for their own safety and they would not hit as hard, and therefore there would be fewer injuries in the NFL. I believe there were also studies done where when they first mandated seatbelts in cars or enforced driving laws in seatbelt laws in various states, the severity of automobile accidents went down, but the number of injuries to bike riders actually went up because people felt safer because they were wearing seatbelts and therefore they were driving less safe. And other drivers weren't really being affected by this because cars were getting safer and they were wearing seatbelts. But just because a person in a car is wearing a seatbelt doesn't make the bike rider that they run into any safer. Right.
And so it's some interesting interactions with this. And I think part of that might be if Yellowstone said, oh, this is just the wild, untamed world, people might be a little more careful about it.
So if they had big flashing signs, caution, these bison will kill you, almost scaring them?
I mean, as long as they didn't make it too gimmicky, as long as people could believe that it was a real threat. Yeah. It's you don't want to paint the bison as just this majestic animal that isn't. I mean, it is majestic, but you don't.
Right.
You want to recognize that it is a real risk to people, and you can't just make it be this fluffy little cuddly teddy bear.
Yeah. So is the fact that we now have a society, and I always complain about this because when I grew up, there weren't warnings on anything. I mean, we were allowed to eat lead paint and all kinds of things. As our society got to the point now that the default is there is no danger if we're not told about it. Whereas when I was growing up, the default always was, hey, anything could be dangerous because you just didn't know and there weren't warnings on everything.
I mean, I can't really speak to that, but that seems like a reasonable theory to me, that the mindset has shifted from just assuming everything was dangerous to assuming everything was safe unless told otherwise.
Right.
And that being said, there are definitely warning signs in Yellowstone.
Yeah.
But I think the overriding feeling of a lot of tourists is, oh, they're just blowing this out of proportion, or they're not really that dangerous, or things like that.
Right. I mean, there's a part of me that wishes, and I know this is going into some tangents about Yellowstone, but it's mostly trying to give some perspective and context to the interaction of how we as hunters, anglers, people who live and experience the natural world in the way we do. I'm trying to draw the contrast between that and how what I'll call the rest of society interacts with wild places. And there's a part of me that wishes Yellowstone had no warning signs, that it was kind of a venture at your own risk, because I think people would be more careful.
I think they would. I mean, every year Yellowstone has stories of people falling off the cliff or falling through the geysers.
Right, walking out on the hot pots and busting through and getting scalded.
Getting mauled by bears, getting run into or run over by bison, just you name it, it's happened.
Right, and so now it's almost like the Yellowstone experience is it's supposed to be a no-risk experience. We're supposed to be able to come here, drive around in our cars, pet all the wildlife, do stupid things, but yet the Park Service owes us the sanitization, if you want to call it that, of the experience such that we can do stupid things and not be accountable for the risk we impose on ourselves.
I mean, yeah, but at the same time, you need to strike a balance between having it safe enough that you can actually get people to go and experience the outdoors, like experience the national park, because that's kind of the point, is to have it available for people to go see.
Yeah.
And making sure that people know that this is actually still dangerous to go do.
Yeah.
And so you probably can't just throw all the safety precautions away and let people to their own devices. You probably need to have something there, but maybe we've provided the feeling that Yellowstone, for example, is safer than it actually is.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to make this sound like the Park Service or anyone is not doing their jobs. I think they are. It's just how it's been presented as, or how some people will assume it's just this safe, cuddly environment is just not true.
Yeah. Well, and part of what kind of worries me is National Geographic, their current issue is all about Yellowstone Park. And I've read it cover to cover. There's a couple pieces in there. I'm in it. A couple other hunters I know are quoted and featured in it. And there's times where it makes it sound way too domestic. It's taking a really cool wild place. And I get that they're trying to engage people. They're trying to find that balance of where do you make this feel intriguing to someone to come and see it and experience it versus explaining the raw reality of what it is.
I mean, at the same time, I feel like the target demographic of National Geographic are people who actually participate in the outdoors and like to travel. And so it might be okay for them, but if they were targeting people who grew up in the middle of, I don't know, it's New York City or something.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Like New York City definitely has some rough spots, but it's different.
It's a different
kind of
danger
danger than being in the middle of the wilderness. And so if they were targeting people who typically just had zero interaction with the outdoors, that could be a problem. But I think their target audience, given what it is, it's probably fine that they've done this.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to take this into the next step. We're going to talk about this. Could take a long time to talk about all these things, Matthew. My mind spins when we start talking about grizzly bears in Yellowstone and everything else. So what do they do with, we always read about the bear that becomes habituated in Yellowstone because some tourists fed them or didn't practice proper food storage or whatever. And we have a saying out here that a fed bear is a dead bear, just because when grizzly bears get habituated to human activity, dog food, camp food, garbage dumps, they become problems. And so a lot of times they get taken out of the population. But in Yellowstone, they don't do that. They take the problem bears and they haul them to the far reaches of some of the areas outside of the park, places a lot of us like to hunt. So they take a bear that is a problem in Mammoth Hot Springs or in West Yellowstone or Old Faithful, one of those areas, and they haul it. I'm just going to use an example. They relocate it in the Taylor's Fork Drainage or Sage Creek or somewhere northwest of the park. Well, those are the areas, and the people relocating these bears who adopted this policy know that those places they're relocating those bears in the fall have some of the highest concentration of elk hunting activity out there. So I'm sitting there thinking, all right, so whoever's adopting this policy says, well, these elk hunters are a bunch of badasses. They can handle these habituated problem bears. Someone's making the determination, whether consciously or subconsciously, that we don't want the Yellowstone Park visitor to be at risk of this bear. We'd rather have an elk hunter at risk of this bear. Am I oversimplifying?
I mean, you might be, but the world is full of oversimplification, so I think it's fine. But, I mean, if you're not putting it there, where are you going to put it? Like,
right.
Are you going to put it in the middle of a population center? Are you going to put it in the middle of a popular trail that people like to take their dogs? Are you going to...
Right.
I mean, there are probably no good places to put it, and so one that typically is only accessed by people who are already going into the far backwoods is probably the one that poses the least damage to society, I would argue.
Right. My theory is that bear, and maybe I shouldn't say my theory, one theory you could argue is that bear is going to be removed from the population anyhow, because he or she is now so habituated. They're going to go and find campsites. They're going to go find cabins. They're going to go find people's homes out in the woods. And that's where they've now become habituated. For me, I wish they would remove that bear from the population in the park and make an example of it and say, look, people, this is what you've done. You've resulted in the death of this grizzly bear. Your stupid behavior, your lack of respect for what this bear needs to survive, to be wild, the blood's on your hands.
I mean, you could do that, but I think you're going to have pretty severe backlash from people who say, no, it's not our fault. It's your fault. Like, you didn't need to euthanize this bear. You know, we can just keep doing things the way we think they should be done, and we think that, you know, the bear, it's fine that the bear is habituated to people. And I think a lot of the problem people are just not going to care.
Yeah. So they're going to blame someone else for the result of their activities.
Yeah.
And so that gets me to some of these points we'll talk about with grizzly bear delisting and stuff is, you know, one of the questions that has been thrown out before is, well, why don't we let hunters go and shoot these problem bears and provide a form of hunting? Well, I was on the governor's grizzly bear roundtable for 3 years that came up with the current conservation strategy. We worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to come up with what's now the management plan that's going to be going forward when bears get delisted, which looks like will happen in the next few, I'd say 6 to 8 months. But then it'll be in court for maybe 6 to 8
basically
decades.
Forever.
Yeah. But one of the discussions that always came up was, well, maybe these problem bears represent hunting opportunity. And I've always advocated, you know what? The worst thing for the image of hunting is to have a game warden or a biologist say, hey, we got this problem bear. He's in the dumpsters down here in Cody, Wyoming, or Jackson, or Big Sky, Montana. We pulled your name from the list. You want to come and shoot him as he climbs out of the dumpster tonight?
And by that point, somebody's already given him a name and has posted 800 photos to his social media, and then you have the Cecil the Lion thing all over again.
Right. And then it becomes the black eye of hunters. Like, we're the problem. My response was, no. Whoever that person was who habituated that bear, take them over there and make them watch you shoot that bear. So they understand that if you don't follow these protocols that all the rest of us follow to try keep bears on the landscape, to try keep their numbers where they should be, if you don't want to follow that, you're the one responsible for that bear dying. Not me, not the hunter. I don't want hunters to be on mop-up duty for all the knuckleheads who can't follow bear protocols. And so I go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, wasn't there a lady a few years back who built a cage in her backyard and was feeding bears through it or something, and then got herself killed when one of the bears turned on her?
Yeah, were those bears or was?
I'm pretty sure it was bears.
It might be. Yeah, she had kind of her. No, these weren't grizzly bears.
I don't think they were grizzlies.
Yeah,
but
my point was the same kind of thing is going on in Yellowstone. I mean, there's signs everywhere. Do not feed the bears. Do not this. Do not that. And what do people do? They feed them. Pretty soon, these bears, a grizzly bear is 400 to 600 pounds of absolute claws, teeth, badass attitude. And if you think you're going to habituate that to human activity and someone's not going to get hurt eventually, You're kidding yourself. I mean, last year, I think he was a retired Park Service employee, got killed in Yellowstone by a bear. And man, what a big stink, what a big blow up about the fact that they decided to dispatch that bear, to kill that bear that had killed this person. And everyone's like, almost like, oh, well, he deserved it, or he wasn't doing this. And I don't know all the facts behind it, but I would bet any money that bear probably had a lot of human contact, that some of that human contact probably contributed to this bear's death and that guy's death, based on ignorant, whether you want to call it ignorant, uninformed, whatever term, of people who think that's how you interact with the natural world. And so, I mean, let's take it the next step further. So in September and October, the largest number of human-caused bear deaths is because of elk hunters protecting their body, their lives. Sometimes it's with gut piles. Sometimes it's just a bad encounter, wrong place, wrong time. But a lot of these bears are the young bears, the problem bears that have been relocated into some of these areas. So in effect, the hunter gets the blame for disposing of or killing a bear in self-defense that was a bear that got trained by some other person to be a problem. And I just, that chaps my hide when that happens. And so, long way of saying, I really wish that they would dispose of those bears in Yellowstone and explain, look, we killed bear number 222 because tourists habituated that bear. Mm-hmm. And if there's going to be this Cecil the Lion social media screaming and yelling match, fine. You guys have this fight over whether you should dispatch that bear or not, but at least then we can't argue about who's to blame.
Yeah. And if it's one of those things where they have made it blatantly clear that, hey, this is the cause of this is why we have to do this. And I think the more public they make it, the more it will really sink into people that, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe we shouldn't feed the bears. But until that time that people actually stop doing that, which I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
Not in our lives.
I think we're still going to have these problem bears, and
right.
might have to go into other ways to deal with them.
Right. And maybe I'm having a pipe dream here, because I do believe that the new American way is that no one's got to be accountable for their actions. So maybe I'm foolish in thinking that we'd hold tourists accountable for the death of the bear rather than some abstract disconnection that they don't have to be accountable for. But that's a tangent about grizzly bears. We can really get into a lot on grizzly bears. I think it was the podcast number 17, I think it was, with Arnie Dude. If you go back and listen to that, Arnie was the endangered species biologist / coordinator for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks for decades before he retired last year. And we got into the discussion about grizzly bears, and that was last summer. And since then, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has started holding public hearings in April. They had one in Cody, one in Bozeman, because the Fish and Wildlife Service is getting ready to issue the new ruling. I think they issued a delisting ruling in 2007, got litigated immediately. They solved all that. I think the next delisting ruling they issued was 2010 or 11. That got litigated immediately. They've solved all those issues. So they're getting ready to issue another delisting ruling. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the best bear biologists in the world, have concluded that the Yellowstone subpopulation, they call them a DPS, distinct population segment, one of 5 DPSs in the lower 48, has reached the point where it is no longer threatened. All the habitat criteria have been met. All of the safety nets are in place. Anything you can think about to protect grizzly bears, we've done all that we practically can do. And it's been a long process. I told you I was on that governor's grizzly bear roundtable. There were 5 from Montana, 5 from Wyoming, and 5 from Idaho. And the 15 of us worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to come up with how do we craft a plan to manage these bears once they're delisted. And you really get to understand how smart these bear biologists are. They have it dialed in. They have it figured out. And so I trust them. When they say that we can delist these bears, I believe that they're not threatened. My worry is a lot of hunters I talk to, they think that this whole delisting process was the end goal was to hunt grizzly bears. And I'm a hunter, and I advocated for state management control that includes hunting as part of this federal plan. But I just want people to understand that the Endangered Species Act is not about getting to hunt grizzly bears. That might be a byproduct, but whether the states decide to have hunting seasons or not have hunting seasons is really not what the goal of the Endangered Species Act is. That goal is to make sure the species is no longer threatened. And I know a lot of guys, they're just looking at it saying, hey, I don't, from my perspective, it's all about I want to go hunt a grizzly bear. But to put safety nets in there, and Matthew, you brought up the Cecil the lion thing. Think about this. What's the bear number? 399, I think, is the one that lives down in Grand Teton National Park, moves back and forth, and has been the subject of all kinds of documentaries and books. And imagine if somebody was issued a tag in Wyoming and bear 399 and her cubs came walking out of the park and some hunter shot that bear.
That would blow up pretty bad, I think.
that would make Cecil the lion look like a tea party. I mean, think about the places you've lived that have been pretty urban since you've been doing your college stuff. Imagine how that would fly.
Yeah, that would not go over terribly well.
No, and so I'm not saying that we don't hunt them. What I'm saying is, and I'm trying to put this in the context of, all right, let's think about, we have a drawing for these grizzly tags. And we're going to get to hunt so few of them. I should say this before I even get into the next, my point I was going to make, is if you go and read the conservation strategy, there are safety nets all over the place. There's a hard population number that if we get below that, the feds are coming in and taking over. We never want to get there. As hard as we've fought and as much as we've invested in getting bears to this point, we do not want the federal government to come in and take over management control again. There's also human-caused mortality quotas. In other words, if the human-caused mortality, and that means whether it's, they have to remove a bear because it's a dump bear, it became habituated, it got run over by a car, or it got hit by a train. Anything that is a human-caused death counts towards this quota of allowed human-caused mortality. So there's a quota for the entire population, and there's a quota as a percentage of the total female population. So 2015 was one of the highest human-caused totals of human-caused deaths ever in the park. Part of that is just there's going to be that many bears. So the more bears you have, the more human-caused interactions going to result in deaths. Well, that number of deaths was so high that I'd have to run through the formula, but I think that if right now we had that level of human-caused deaths and the states had control, I think the way the plans are written, there would not be any allowed hunting in the following year. So point of me saying that is, if guys think that there's going to be this big bunch of grizzly tags that you're going to go out and hunt them, hit the reset button, because there's just not going to be a lot of opportunity. It's that simple.
So if this is not about hunting them, then what's it really about? State control versus federal control, or what?
That's a huge part of it. You bring up a really good point, Matthew, because the people who are litigating this issue and don't want delisting, there's a former biologist. He's written a lot of peer-reviewed science on grizzly bears, but he left the scientific community and he's now become an advocate against delisting. And if you think about science, they take this oath of, I'm an objective researcher, I'm an objective scientist, I'm not here to advocate for a position one way or the other. I'm here to do my research and tell you the facts. So this person, when he left an agency and became an advocate, to me it's hard to say he's now an objective scientist. But the point being, he is quoted in, I think it was NPR or Montana Public Radio, in an interview saying that we cannot have delisting of grizzly bears until we reform the state-based model of wildlife management. And he goes on to say that the reason we can't let grizzly bears be delisted is grizzly bears represent the greatest opportunity to reform the state-based model of wildlife management. Anyone who's ever studied wildlife law in this country knows wildlife is held in trust by the states, not by the federal government, but by the states. That's why the laws here in Montana are different than the laws in Idaho, different than the laws in Colorado. It's a state model. It always has been, always will be. So you bring up the point. What's the motivation? Well, a lot of these groups, and if you read like I have, and I've been doing seminars on this in the last 6 months, the principles of conservation versus the principles of environmentalism, all the scholars will tell you that modern day conservation, and they usually talk about that being the post-Roosevelt era, and modern day environmentalism, which they usually talk about as the post-World War II era, have two different theories on that. Conservation has the theory that state-based models is how we manage wildlife. The environmental principle is, no, we have federal oversight. So that's a very good point of what's relevant to this is we not only we have so many competing differences. I don't know if competing is the right word, but so many different perspectives of how we look at this, depending on whether we subscribe to Model A or Model B, conservation versus environmentalism, or preservationism versus something else. But yeah, you're right. They're grizzly bears represent one of the critical arguments about where we're going to go with the future of wildlife management in this country.
I mean, it seems like it's right in the middle of the intersection between the federal control and the state control. So you've got both groups arguing that one way is better, and there's not really a whole lot of, consensus on one way or the other. Like the ESA in general seems like it's one extremely, I can't think of the right word. It's just a very complicated piece of legislation to really consolidate with the current rules.
It is. And who's going to decide? A judge that is probably sympathetic to federal oversight, because it's going to go to a federal court. We can see the pattern. We've seen it with wolves when Wyoming, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan lost state management control. They took it to a judge in, I think, the D.C. Circuit, federal circuit court, overruled and said, no, you don't get state control. And so you think about, and I don't mean to pick on the attorneys of the world, but us CPAs are really good at picking on attorneys. So I'm going to, because to be a judge, you need to be an attorney. But if you think about this, what most of the law students you knew, did they have undergraduate degrees in wildlife biology?
No.
they English, history.
It was political science, that sort of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So they then, and even the older judges of, that have worked their way up the bench to higher level courts, they had the same backgrounds. They had poli-sci majors, history majors, whatever. across the board, but heavily towards the non-sciences. And then they get a law degree. How does that qualify them? It qualifies them to interpret law, but law in itself is not the filter by which wildlife projection of how a wildlife species is going to do, projection of the planning and all the considerations, all the modeling, all the variables. They are not prepared and qualified to make that judgment.
I mean, the whole theory behind it is you have the experts who come in and plead their case one way or the other.
Right.
And two experts can look at the same set of facts and come to completely opposing conclusions.
Right. And so these groups know where those judges reside, and that's where those cases get litigated. But anyhow, boy, we're getting way out here in the weeds on some of this stuff, and I was trying to make a point, getting ready to make a point. Now I lost what the hell it was.
Probably delisting's not about hunting, somewhere in that realm.
Yeah, I was somewhere in that, but now, and I got to the point of, I don't want people to expect that there's going to be a ton of hunting, because there's not. And oh well, maybe it'll come to me later in the podcast. I still think I got Alaska jet lag or something. I got black bears on the brain.
Yeah. Well, this seems like a good time for you to talk about some of the stuff that we have planned for the digital marketing strategy. You want to tell them about the big giveaway that you're planning in the upcoming months?
Yeah. And since you're the digital, let's back up a second. I think it was podcast number 8. You and Troy and Lauren were on that podcast.
I think it was 6, actually.
Okay. So that, if you go back and listen to that, you'll get a little bit of insight about how this gig started. Well, if anyone ever asks, I always blame Matthew for me getting into this business to start with. So it's interesting now that he's got his computer engineering degree. He's always been kind of my technology crutch. I have to call him and ask him where the power button is on my new cell phone and stuff like that. But so what I get to be the front of this operation. Behind the scenes is my wife handling all the administrative affairs. We have a group of investors who support us and help us in so many ways. But on the technology and what would maybe generation opening an old gray-haired guy like me, opening his eyes to the trends in media consumption of a 25-year younger generation. That's been a big part of your role, Matthew.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm 26, as we mentioned before. I just turned 26 today.
Yeah. Happy birthday.
Thanks. And so this has really been one of the things that I've hoped that the TV show could do for a long time. And as he can verify, I've been trying to push, hey, let's do digital, let's do YouTube, let's try to get into all this stuff pretty much since this first started.
Right.
And now with the increasing number of people who are cable cutters, or what's the new word?
Cord cutters.
Cord cutters. There's another term they use for people who are not completely getting rid of cable, but just kind of shredding. I think cable snipping, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, where there's this huge growing market for content on the internet, and moreover, it's this want for high quality content on the internet.
Right. Not just the guy with his little handy camera or cell phone that makes you seasick when you watch it.
Right. So the hallmark of YouTube has always been anyone can do it. Anyone can upload videos, and it's been very successful. The problem with that is that it's been hard to bring these sort of advertising revenue that TV garners into the digital space, because they just assume that everything that's on YouTube is substantially lower quality.
Yeah.
And so that's part of what we're trying to do, is we're trying to bring the high quality content to the internet and still convince the sponsors and advertisers that this is just as valuable, or perhaps even more valuable than your airtime is on TV. And so at least from my perspective, there's a few things that I really like about this. I went to undergrad for engineering, and so I really like data and how viewership numbers work for TV is Nielsen sends out surveys or has little boxes that record what people watch, but based on the number of TV shows and the number of channels and the truthfulness of respondents and the self-selection of respondents and the random or not randomness of which Nielsen selects people and all sorts of other things, there's a lot of error that goes on in the rating systems from Nielsen. And so one of the big advantages is that you have instantaneous, extremely accurate feedback on all of the videos that get watched and all of the advertising.
Yeah.
So
Huge. And that's been one of the criticisms of TV is Nielsen's are this, it's an art, not a science. And for a little more background to those of you who aren't in this world, Nielsen sends out, as Matthew said, these booklets. We have one right now, actually. I could, if our show was airing on Sportsman's Channel right now, I could watch my own show and affect my own Nielsen ratings.
Could watch your own show 4 times.
but we only air from July through December. But the other thing is Nielsen's sampling is heavily weighted in A and B counties. A is urban counties. B are suburban counties. C counties are suburban rural, and D counties are considered rural counties. So the Nielsen sampling is heavily weighted towards A counties and A and B counties. So you think about just the nature of where our demographic is most heavily weighted in outdoor sports, outdoor activities. It's heavily weighted towards C and D counties. So you take all that, then you take the small sample size and the small viewership of, cable networks that once you slice and dice it, you can get some wild, crazy variations in your Nielsen sampling.
Yeah. Pretty much the only reason that the Nielsen ratings work is that everyone has kind of bought into the system that, we'll kind of trust Nielsen, and they might be wrong sometimes, but overall, maybe they're okay.
Kind of like weathermen.
Yeah.
Before radar.
So they're back in the 2000s when Larry Page and Sergey Brin were first starting to get Google up and running. It was well established at this point, but they went to the CEO of Viacom and said, here's how our advertising model works. We want you to give us money, but only when people actually click on your advertisements. And in slightly more vulgar terms, he told them, you're screwing with the magic. And it's really that way. The entire media industry, it's changing, but it's very heavily rooted in the ways of the past.
Right.
And a big portion of that is the Nielsen ratings. And it's taken longer than I think it should to move into the digital realm.
Right. So what Matthew's getting at here, and we're going to talk about this, you guys have heard us talk about our YouTube channel. So this fall, we're going to be on Sportsman's Channel July through December, every Sunday night. Here in Montana, it's going to be 9 o'clock Sunday nights, and we're on Mountain Time, so do your math from there. But we're going to be doing this and airing on TV, but all of our old episodes and a lot of our information, how to kind of content is already up on Facebook or on YouTube. And we are loading that every week. We're loading more and more and more and more because in a half-hour TV episode, there's so much that you can't put up there. Just time constraints. So you try to tell a story that's compelling to get people to watch for that long a time. But you think about all the logistics, all applying for tags, how you do this, why you do that. How, I get, I don't know how many emails a month and a week. My wife Kim manages them and sorts them for me. So those of you who send me emails and takes me a long time to get back, I apologize. But point of that being is our digital platforms are to try fill that void and give you way, way more content than you could ever get from TV. Plus, we also want to reach those of you who are cord cutters. I bet a large majority of you who listen to this podcast, because I get the demographics on this podcast. This podcast demographic is not C and D counties. It's mostly A and B counties, and quite a few C counties. So that means it's from urban to the suburban rural spectrum of the audience. You're mostly male. You're mostly between age 25 and 45. And we've done other surveys that tell me a lot of you are cord cutters, that you don't probably catch us on TV. So for our partners, for the message we're trying to get out, that you can hunt public lands, that you can go self-guided and do all this, we got to have a presence on these other platforms. And Matthew's been pushing me down that path, and I'm so thankful for that, because I get so busy trying to do the TV stuff that I just don't have time to pull away and do the things you're always telling me, Dad, you got to do this stuff.
Yeah. I'm always telling him, hey, we need more content.
Yeah.
Do more podcasts. Speaking of which, I think I'm trying to get him back to once a week instead of twice or once every 2 weeks.
But he's cut me some slack because, we had this thing called tax season that always distracts me and takes some of my time being a CPA. I have this weird liver condition, and I've had a 2-month funk here where my liver has really caused me fits. So I apologize. It's not a good excuse, but we've not been able to do weekly podcasts like I'd hope so. But if Matthew sends me the schedule and says, hey, you're doing weekly podcasts, get ready. I'm probably going to be doing weekly podcasts.
Yeah. So one thing I'd really like to highlight is the additional value of the extra content that's on YouTube.
Yeah.
So beyond the TV shows, which are mostly there for entertainment value, they tell a story, and there's some tips and tricks. There's some educational info thrown in there. A lot of what's on the YouTube channel is how you do things like tag applications. Here's how you find spots where elk might be, things like that, right?
Yep. Yeah, we have the series out there we're doing with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation called Elk Talk. And that walked through how to apply for tags in all these states. And then it's like, okay, if you didn't draw a tag, here's where you can still get tags. And right now, all the we're mid-May. All the tag drawings are coming out. And we'll kind of wrap up the podcast with that. But there's still opportunity for everybody to go elk hunting every year, whether you draw these limited entry tags or not. So we talk about that. And then we get into this segment of what I call the system, how to find elk on public land, because the number one reason people don't fill their tag is they struggle at finding elk on a consistent basis. And then we wrap up that Elk Talk series with a whole bunch of stuff about, equipment, tactics, research, how we do this, how we do that. So there's all that. We've done some bag dumps. Isn't that what we're called? Yeah, we call them bag dumps, where so many of you email me and say, Randy, what's in your pack? What do you use for this? What do you use for that? So we did a video called The Bag Dump, and you can we should have told them our YouTube channel is called Randy Newberg Hunter, right?
Shameless plug right now, since this is my little baby that we're talking about here. We have social media presence on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. We have our own website called randynewberghunter.com or randynewberg.com. Sorry. Which includes the Hunt Talk forum, right. And at the same time, there's also an email list that goes along with that.
Right.
So I'm going to encourage you to all check out any of these which interest you. There's lots of content on YouTube. There's updates on Facebook, Instagram. Hunt Talk is a great place to have some discussions with fellow hunters across the United States and even outside of the United States. Also provides tons and tons of high quality information. Yeah,
I'm going to stop you right there, because Hunt Talk is, and I know other people who own forums would probably email me and say, Newberg, shut up. But if you said, Randy, there's one elk in that Madison mountain range, and we need to find it. There's about a dozen guys on Hunt Talk who I would put my money on any of them, that they would be the guy who would find it in that 3 million acres. They're just the Hunt Talk crowd. They're all public land guys, self-guided, do-it-yourself dudes. And if you want to talk and hang out with guys who have it figured out about equipment, about tactics, about gear, strategies, they got it. They got it dialed in. I feel like such a half-assed amateur when I'm in these discussions with some of these Hunt Talk guys, because I'm like a downstreamer compared to most of them. So if you go there, it's hunttalk.com. And are we going to get into the big promo thing?
Yeah, might as well just talk about the big promo now while we're on the topic.
All right. So the reason that hunttalk.com plays into what we're going to talk about next is, again, this is Matthew's strategy about how we're going to keep our TV audience there this fall, but yet we're going to convert them to digital followers. And so here's how it's going to work. This is all going to be out on our website, the randynewberg.com website, by the end of June. So those of you who watch our TV show know that every year we've been giving away a free hunt. Someone gets drawn for an elk hunt. And that works okay, but it's kind of an all or nothing sort of thing. It doesn't allow a lot of people to participate. It's like one person gets the big hurrah. And so here's what we're going to do. We've got 5 platforms where we try to reach people besides TV. And these are all digital platforms that Matthew is managing, or at least guiding me on. And you mentioned them. YouTube channel, Randy Newberg Hunter.
Yep. Facebook.
Facebook is Randy Newberg Hunter.
Instagram
is Randy Newberg Hunter.
Hunt Talk, which, as we mentioned before, is just hunttalk.com. And then as part of signing up to Hunt Talk, you can sign up for the email list.
Right. Or you can sign up for the email list of Randy Newberg at randynewberg.com. So those are 5 platforms that we use to communicate with our audience strictly digitally. And so here's the gig. If you subscribe to any of those, for every one of those you subscribe to, your name gets in the hat for each platform you're subscribing to. So you could have your name in the hat 5 times if you subscribe to all 5 platforms. Am I right on that?
Yeah.
And so July through November, every one of our partners, whether they're partners on the TV show, partners in this podcast, or partners on the Hunt Talk website, every one of them are giving us monthly prizes to give away. So, and I'm not talking like, oh, you're going to get a bumper sticker or a t-shirt. These are significant prizes. And every month we're going to draw your name from wherever you're entered. So you might be in the July drawing 5 times if you subscribe to all 5 of our platforms. And we're going to draw a separate winner for every prize that's donated to the cause. We're going to do that in July. We're going to do that in August, September, October, and November. And then comes December, the big, whatever you want to call it. We used to experiment with this out on Hunt Talk. We called it Badass Drawing. It was the Badass Drawing and Sponsor Spotlight is what the acronym
Was it? I thought it was the Badass Year-End something or other, right?
But anyhow, we're kind of striking that up again this year. And what we're doing is for December, everybody who's subscribed to any of these platforms, so if you subscribe to all 5, you're going to have your name in 5 times for the year-end drawing. And we're drawing 1 name in December. And this person is going to get a prize package of gear. I haven't even added it up yet. It's going to be a Howa Alpine mountain rifle, which right there's over $1,000. It's going to be a Leupold VX6 scope, which right there is over $1,500. It's going to be a Mystery Ranch backpack. There's another $600. A pair of Kinatrek boots, another $400. A set of Sitka gear, over $1,000. a package from Gerber, from Onyx Maps, from blah, 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 blah. All of our partners, Orion Coolers. You're going to get one person in December is going to get drawn for, I mean, Christmas is going to look pretty marginal compared to what that person's going to win. So
Are you going to call that person on Christmas and say, hey, look what you won?
no, we're doing it. We're actually doing it in the first part of January. We're running it through December. So I don't know. It just seems like it. We don't want to shortchange the December folks who get into it, because we're still going to be, and we're going to run a commercial in our TV show telling people about this. But the whole idea is we want to reward the folks who are following us on our digital platforms. We want to encourage them to follow us, and those who are, we want to make it worth your time. We can't promise you that you're all going to win, but you get all of our content for free. You get all of our information, advice. Maybe it's not good advice. It might be worth, as they say, be careful with advice. Sometimes it's only worth what you paid for it. So that's our strategy, isn't it, Matthew?
Yeah.
Have I missed anything?
Yeah. In addition to that, I've got some other things that I'm trying to convince him to do here, like some live question and answer sessions that I think would be great, but might be a struggle to do with our 1 megabit per second upload speed here at the house. A few other things, just trying to get a little more interaction, get a little more information out there for people of varying skill levels and different backgrounds. For example, one of the big demographics coming to hunting are people who didn't grow up hunting but are interested in it because of the food aspect.
Yep.
And that's a demographic that is typically around my age, is typically from a city or suburban area, and is just not used to the traditional kind of hunting culture that's out there.
Yeah.
And so we'll see. I mean, it's always a struggle trying to get the right information out to a variety of people, and not everything is going to be super relevant to everyone.
Right.
But
And that's the struggle is sometimes, like I was at the backcountry hunter and angler thing in early April, and I could not believe how many people came up to me and said, I've never watched your TV show before, but I've been watching your YouTube channel. Man, there's so much stuff there for a person like me. I just got into hunting. It's all about the food. I'm blah, blah, blah. I mean, a lot of people. It struck me how many people are coming to hunting through the food aspect. And so some of the things I took as pretty basic, and I mean, let's just think about it. You started shooting shotguns when you were like 6 years old. So you knew the difference between a shotgun and a rifle. You knew the difference between a shell and a bullet. And I'm oversimplifying here, but you think about how much we take for granted in the hunting culture and how hard it would be to step into that if you didn't have someone to show you the ropes. Just the terminology, the jargon, the
yeah, I mean, there's a lot there, and trying to go up to some random person at the corner bait shop isn't typically the most enlightening experience if you're brand new to everything.
Right. And so my point being is some of you are super experts at so much of this that you should probably be doing these videos and not me. And you might see some of our content out there that's geared towards the person Matthew just talked about. But we're also going to have a lot of content geared towards the advanced person, the whoever it is at whatever level of hunting experience there is. So there is a challenge in trying to cover the whole gamut of that, what I'll call new media consumer, the digital media consumer.
I mean, you've definitely got some videos out there right now that are aimed at the more experienced people.
Right.
I mean, I don't know too many new hunters who are going to go try and mount their own scopes on their rifle when it comes straight out of the box. So that's one of the videos that you put up recently that I think would be really helpful for someone who's always taken their gun to a gunsmith and had them do that, for example.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be a variety of information out there, and some of the things are going to be extremely useful, I think, to a variety of different people.
I hope so. Are we going to be able to convince Lillian to be our guinea pig? So little background here. Matthew's serious girlfriend of how long? 5 years now?
Yeah. Little over 4.
Oh, 4 years.
Yeah.
My wife and I are always waiting for the phone call when they're telling us that they're going to get married, because we adore Lillian to no end.
I mean, you promised us money to elope, right?
$20,000 if you'll elope. Deal still stands.
Mm-hmm.
Your mom and I eloped, and we've been married 28 years almost, so it'll work. Plus, you'll be $20,000 richer.
I thought the marriage advice was supposed to wait until the end of the show.
I said we weren't doing marital advice on this one, but it looks like
you broke the rule.
Okay. Anyhow, it's been interesting for me. Matthew's girlfriend Lillian is getting a PhD in one of the science fields, and she's extremely intelligent about a lot of this stuff. But she comes from a non-hunting family and has been immersed. It comes to Montana regularly. Been immersed in the shooting and what we do, fishing and wild game and stuff. And so she's been a great sounding board for me. And so I often think of her, or at least her generation, her demographic, as a little bit of the target audience for this stuff we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. And before coming out here, she'd never shot a gun.
Right.
She'd never eaten venison or elk or anything. And,
right. Kind of like me. I'd never ridden the subway or taken a cab in D.C.
Right.
It's you are a function and a product of your environment.
Right. And so she's very down to earth in a lot of ways, and was open to trying venison when she came out here one time. I think we gave her deer, elk, and bison at some point, right?
And walleyes.
And so she was open to trying that, and has stated in the past that she would be open to trying going whitetail hunting in Virginia, where she lives. And she hasn't made good on that yet, but part of that's me not wanting to pressure her too much.
Right. And she's got a pretty heavy academic rigor going on right now.
That's what happens when you're in a PhD program, I think.
But the point of that being is someday either her or a similar demographic we're going to have on the TV show. I would almost like to have a podcast of 2 or 3 people of that demographic profile, because I learn so much when I hang out with non-hunters, and I'm not saying anti-hunters. I'm talking about people who are genuinely interested in their food source, where it comes from, its quality, its origin, and they're starting to look down this path of hunting as maybe a solution. And they don't just jump there right away, but those are really valuable discussions. Like we had Nicole on the podcast, I don't know, 4 or 5 podcasts ago. She works for Meat Eater, and she talked about how before she started working for a company that produced hunting content, how she really didn't get the grip and grin idea that all of us in the hunting world, we whip out our phone and showing our buddies the limited ducks hanging off the stump, or, the big smile with the big elk or whatever. And until Nicole really started, and it was before the podcast, she was way more reserved on the podcast than before we turned it on. She said a lot of things that still strike me today. And so many of these people that are coming to hunting are giving me a wider view of what the future of hunting should be, or will be, I guess, just by its demographics, the demographics of this country. Been very helpful. So I want to that was my whole purpose of interjecting Lillian here, is that she represents that demographic that someday I'd like to get into the program.
What would you think about doing an example video where you go maybe shoot a whitetail doe, something that's not necessarily regarded as a big trophy, for example, and going through the whole process of processing and then either storage preparation or food preparation?
Right.
Just
Yeah,
the whole thing.
I'd love to do that. why don't I send the camera crew back with you, and you and Lillian go do it?
I mean, that would still require her
other
to
than
agree being
right.
on camera and hunting and
Right.
all of the above.
Right. No, I don't want to put anyone in the hot spot.
Yeah.
But I just think that kind of content is going to be very helpful to a digital audience. And if we in the hunting world want to be relevant, we better be paying attention to the changes that are going on demographically.
I feel like in general, the hunting kind of, I know people kind of hate this term, but the hunting community has really been just an old boys club for the most part for a long time.
Well, it's not you thinking that. Look at it.
Yeah.
It's mostly white male Christians.
Yeah. And so now there's this new group that doesn't hold the same traditional political beliefs.
Right.
And so it's a little hard for them to break in, even though they're going to share a lot of the same kind of theories on, I want food that I know where it comes from. I want it to be good quality. And they also agree with a lot of the conservation type mentality.
Clean air, clean water, healthy lands. Yeah.
Right. And so there's enough of an overlap there that we really need to be welcoming these people into the fold. And a lot of times they're shunned away because maybe they vote on the other side of the political ticket than the traditional hunting bloc does. And that's something that probably needs to change if hunting is going to survive past 1 or 2 generations from now.
No, you're exactly right, Matthew. What the face of hunting will look like 25 years from now is so much different than what it is today, just because of the demographic changes in the United States. And either the hunting world adapts to that in its message, in its image, in its actions, in its motives, or you don't. And like you said, when all of us old gray-haired guys die in 25 years, hunting, as we know it today, kind of goes the same path.
And that's one of the other things, or one of the other reasons why I'm really trying to push this digital platform is this demographic. What was the term the BHA guy used? The adult onset hunter?
Yeah.
That demographic is technically a little young, or not technically, typically a little younger. Usually is a little more involved in the technological things like digital media.
Right.
And so it's a good way to really reach that group of person and talk to their media consumption habits and get them the information that they need. I mean, I've tried to go on a number of the Department of Fish and Game websites, and some of them are extremely difficult to navigate.
That's a good point. I want to bring this up. I wish we would have recorded this. I was at an elk summit. I think it was May 3rd and 4th. The Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation brings in all of the state directors from the elk states. And Steve Ranella gave the morning presentation, and I started the afternoon presentation. And Steve made a super good point. And he talked about the complexity of regulations. He said, you know what? I think you guys as directors need to go and take 12 test cases, sample people, have them try to buy a turkey tag from your agency and go out and kill a turkey without breaking one of your rules. And all the directors looked at each other like, holy cow, he's right. And I think Steve really hit a point there of, we have this world of technology. We have business and industry is trying to make it simpler and easier and communicate better, make it more user-friendly. Hunting regulations by their enactment, but also the proclamations and the websites are, like you said, they're, as a general rule, not all, but as a general rule, are pretty bad. Such that getting a new hunter involved by saying, hey, go read the website at State XYZ, they're probably going to just close it down.
Yeah, they're going to look at the 300-page rule book and say, "Oh, I don't know what's going on. It's not worth the effort."
Right. Or they're not going to be able to find what they need on the website, which is why I think forums like Hunt Talk become a very valuable piece in the information equation of this, because these people go to a state website. It's like, man, this looks like some sort of hieroglyphs. And they still have the interest to hunt. And then they find forums like ours, like Hunt Talk. And they come there and they find a lot of accommodating members who are willing to help them down that path.
Yeah. Can I go off on a tangent here for a few minutes?
Tangents, podcasts and tangents are like
all right,
peanut butter and jelly.
So talking again about new people getting into hunting,
yeah,
and talking about drawing tags, the whole preference point system where the longer you've put in,
right,
dictates whether or not you get the tag.
Right.
In my opinion, this seems like a large government-mandated pyramid scheme.
So you're in an MBA program right now. Is it, when you guys are studying business history, would this be considered a Ponzi scheme?
I haven't studied that specifically. I've mostly been in the operations side, but it seems a little questionable at best. From my understanding of the preference points, preference points being the ones where if you're at the top of the heap, you just get the tag.
Right. Bonus points are like raffle tickets. The more you have, the better your chance, but no guarantee. Whereas a preference point is he or she with the most points gets the tag.
Right. And so in a lot of these states, when did preference points tend to start being enacted?
In the late 80s, Colorado started their elk preference points, and then other states picked it up, mostly in the 90s. There's still two states, New Mexico and Idaho, are the two western states, well, and Alaska, 3 western states that don't have any type of point system. Okay. All the rest have some sort of elaborate scheme to help the old gray-haired farts like me have a better advantage to draw that extra tag before we die.
Right. And so these states are going to have 20 to 30 years of this system in place. Mm-hmm. And these super premium hunts, or the super premium units, are going to take 21 points to draw.
Or more.
But every year that number keeps climbing, because you have people with, you have more people at 20 points than you had at 21, and you have more people at 19 than you had at 20, and there aren't enough tags to make up for that difference.
Exactly.
And
point creep, they call that.
Yeah. And so I haven't run the numbers on this, but I have a feeling if I made a model of what it would take for a new person to try and draw one of these tags, they would just never draw it in their lifetime.
Right. They would view this as their donation to wildlife management.
Right. And so I think the system is kind of rigged against new hunters in more ways than one. Mm-hmm. And so if we're really getting people into this, we might have to have a real hard look at the preference and bonus point system and say, are we systematically ensuring that nobody ever wants to enter this activity ever again?
Right. I think you're absolutely right, Matthew. And I sat on the Montana committee. I think it was in '98 when Montana put together a committee. Me and I think 12 other people and a couple non-residents, a couple outfitters. We came up with Montana's bonus point system. And it was called a point system. We didn't know if it was going to be bonus or preference, what it was going to be. And I think at that time I was 35. And I was the youngest person on that committee by at least 10 years, maybe 15 years. And some of the things that I threw out there, I thought I was going to get beat up. I mean, these were really good guys. Don't get me wrong. They're all, their heart's in the right place. But, you know, I advocated that moose, goat, and sheep, which are rare in any of the western states, should be once in a lifetime. You draw, you're done. Because some states have it that way. Oh, my goodness. Some of these guys, they'd already drawn 1 or 2 moose or goat tags, and they're like, no, I want a third one. And then I said, all right, you know, for moose, goat, and sheep in Montana, we have a 7-year wait. Other states have, every state has some way of handling this, either once in a lifetime or a longer wait list. And most of our hunts in Montana are general unit for elk and deer. And I suggested, well, maybe if you draw one of our special elk tags, one of our limited entry elk tags, you should be put on a 5-year wait list or a 7-year wait list so that we can plow through the applicants, and it doesn't, you don't end up with people with 20 points still waiting to somehow get their number pulled. Oh, mercy. It is like, who invited this Newberg guy to this committee? What a knucklehead. Point being, they were all a bunch of old gray-haired boys worried about, and those listening to this podcast will rationalize an argument against what you said of how we might systematically be eliminating young hunters. They will rationalize it by, well, that's how it was when I came into the system. Or, well, I've paid my dues. I get that to some degree. And it's getting now to where in some states, it's not just these premium tags that require a lot of points. Nevada, every tag is on a draw. Utah, most tags are on a draw. New Mexico, Arizona, every deer tag in Colorado. And a lot of these are taking more and more and more points, if you want to, whether they're bonus or preference points, even for residents to draw those tags. So the opportunity to go and hunt big game in states that have that problem, it has to be a factor for younger people.
According to most of what I've seen in my MBA so far, I'm pretty sure the advice that they would give is you just need to raise the price if that's the case. But
then, right. And then some would say, well, then you're pricing people out.
Right. And that's also something that would discriminate against the new hunters.
Exactly. Because they're probably at a point in their life where they have less resources if they're younger.
For example, if I wanted to say I was a college student going to school in Virginia or something like that, and I wanted to go hunt elk in Montana, that would cost me what, $1,000 all told, just from
for the tag,
applications and tags.
Yeah,
and
close to that, $900, something like that. Yeah,
and that's
significant,
not doable for a lot of people in that kind of situation. And so, if you're pricing it to the point where no one can get into it until they're 45 and have stable income and have excess spending money, you're losing an awful lot of interest in the activity.
Right.
In those years.
Yeah. People have found other things to do that are within their budget or within their likelihood of achievement. Mm-hmm. You're probably not the example because, in our house, hunting's serious business. My wife allowed me to start building this hunting slush fund way before the TV show started. So I've been applying in Western states since 1993 across the West. So I've got more points than...
Yeah, I mean, you've burned a lot of them from the show.
I have for the show. The only person I know who has more points than me is Matthew. Because since he was 12, or in some states you even got to start putting in at age 10, I remember, you've been building points. So you're the exception. So you're going to get a lot of great hunts once you get out of this whole school program. But that's not the norm.
Right. I'm not the new hunter that is going to try and get into this and realize that they're being locked out of some of the more popular units.
Right.
I'm the exact opposite. I'm from a family that's been deeply ingrained with this and is kind of paid into the system for the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah. Do you think if you went to some of your peers and said, hey, let's start building points in Nevada, you got to, or Utah or any state where just to build points, you got to buy a $150 license?
No, that's a non-starter.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that many people in my current school system that actually go hunting, but I knew a fair number when I was working full-time in Pennsylvania. And over there, it's like, it's $150 for the application. Why don't I just go buy a tag over the counter and go shoot a whitetail in Pennsylvania?
Right.
Or things like that. Oh, I could apply for 10 years and I might never get it.
Right.
I mean, even if I didn't already have a bunch of points, I would be optimizing, okay, where can I go that I would be able to have a reasonable chance to get something and go pretty much guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be trying to maximize that kind of cost basis versus success versus what do I want to be doing versus time periods. And I think I would not be chasing any of the trophy units.
Right. So some people would say, well, that's all right. If you aren't that dedicated, you probably shouldn't be involved.
But that's, if you have that kind of mentality with everyone, you're just going to have
soon no one's going to be involved.
Right. You're going to have the super rich people who own hundreds of thousands of acres of land, and they're going to be the only ones who actually go hunting. Yeah. Or something like that.
Right.
Like,
something where access to resources is going to determine who hunts. Right. And in the United States, part of why hunting has enjoyed such remarkable acceptance is it's always been an activity of the masses. So we could go on this topic for a long time, and it's a tangent from where we were, but it's certainly not a tangent to things I've talked about on this podcast in the past. I worry about these elaborate schemes, and if I totaled up your points across the West and my points across the West, I bet you it'd be close to 300 points. More than that. It'd probably be close to 400 points, 500 points across the West. I would give up all of our points in all the states if they would all go to what New Mexico or Alaska or Idaho do. I mean, what's more fair than everybody having the same chance every year?
Mm-hmm. I mean, you're going to have those people who complain like, oh, I put in for 25 years and I haven't gotten anything.
Oh, well, that's called luck.
Yeah.
I mean, I've drawn, and this is beyond luck, I've drawn 6 limited entry bull elk tags in Montana in 11 years. Rifle bull elk tags. That's ridiculously lucky. And that committee, if they would have forced us to, if they would have followed my suggestion that you have to wait 5 years to draw one of those tags, I wouldn't have drawn 6 of them in the last 11 years. But so I think as a society, we have a tendency to almost
look out for our own interests.
Oh, for sure. I mean, who's writing the rules? The old gray-haired guys like me. So who are the rules going to be swayed more towards? Old gray-haired guys like me. But one last piece on that. So we've kind of talked about the traveling non-resident hunter of what this cost would be and how that cost and the points to accumulate discourages them. I think even with residents, it can discourage them. Because I think it was last legislative session or the prior one, Montana said, oh, it's not bad enough that we've got all these old guys with lots of points. Let's square the points. So they passed a law to square the points.
In the bonus point, you mean?
In the bonus point system. So now let's say I've got 15 bonus points in Montana. Mm-hmm. You square that's 225. The 14-year-old, been in the system 2 years, he gets to square his 2. He gets 4. I mean, how bad do we have to slant the table in favor of us old gray-haired farts before we're satisfied that
I mean, I could get behind that a little more. The preference point thing that actually guarantees that the 14-year-old wouldn't get the tag.
Right.
I can't get behind that. The squaring thing, yeah, it slants it, but it at least gives a chance to the other people.
But couldn't we have just left it as, hey, you've got 15 points, Randy, the 14-year-old has 2 points?
Yeah.
I mean, did we really have to, instead of make it a ratio of 15 to 2, make it a ratio of 225 to 4?
Yeah. No, I'm not going to argue with that. It's definitely much worse than the 15 to 2. But
So on that,
Can I add one other little thing to this quick?
yeah, for sure.
Are we running out of time?
Or there's no shortage of
All
time, but people, they'll just hang up and cut us off if they don't want to listen anymore.
So one of the nice things that I noticed, I'm in school in North Carolina right now. And North Carolina has this program where if you are attending an in-state university full-time, you can get a resident hunting permit or you can get a non-resident permit for resident prices,
right,
which makes things extremely more accessible than they would be otherwise.
Yep.
And I'm not aware if other states
they do
have
quite a few
this,
other states have that, but each of them have their different thresholds. Okay,
right.
You had to have lived here 6 months. You had to change your driver's license.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
North Carolina, as far as I understand it, just requires that you are attending a university in the state.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see something a little more expansive. Like if you are attending any full-time university or any university full-time or college full-time, you can have resident prices anywhere, for example.
Now you got to, so Matthew asked me like before the podcast, he's like, how riled up can I get him? He waited until the end to throw one out there about getting people riled up, because you just laid one out there that, well, if some guys probably drove in the ditch when they heard you say that.
I mean, so my girlfriend's in Virginia, and if I wanted to go get a hunting tag or a hunting license in Virginia so I could go out with her and actually hunt, I believe I would have to pay full non-resident price, which would be, I don't know, $200-300 somewhere in there, which is not the worst, but it's also kind of burdensome being a full-time student and not working full-time and having that income. And so I think if you could do that, that would really help.
It would help college students.
Yeah. And that's, I think, a key group that you want to keep them in hunting if they grew up in it, and you want to make sure that there aren't barriers to entry if they didn't grow up hunting.
Yeah. Earlier you said, I'll buy into part of what I said. I'll buy into your idea that within the state where you're going to school. But I don't buy into the idea that everywhere.
No?
Nah.
Why not?
Because do you really need to have that benefit everywhere? I mean, the idea is, okay, you're making some investment in our state here. You're going to school here. It's convenient. It's kind of, we're going to give you resident prices because if you want to go get some food, we don't want that to be a barrier. If you can afford to travel from North Carolina to Colorado to go hunting, well, I don't think you need Colorado resident prices.
But if I want to travel from North Carolina to Virginia to go hunting, that's a tank of gas to get there is $20. That's not
right
extravagant by any means.
Right. No, we'll just disagree on that one.
All right.
You aren't voting for Bernie, are you?
I don't plan on it.
I just pissed off a bunch of people one way or the other.
Yeah.
But okay, let's wrap this up with a few things. We were talking about tags, points, draw results, stuff like that. Wyoming's already issued their elk results. I didn't draw anything. You didn't draw anything. Arizona issued their elk and antelope draw results. Neither of us drew anything. This is the first time in the history of us doing this show that we've come out of Arizona and Wyoming without at least one elk tag for the TV show. So I was about ready to hit the panic button, and then myself and Corey Jacobson drew Gila archery tags in New Mexico. So that was cool. I drew... Well, I always get an over-the-counter Montana deer and elk tag, so that's
kind of
net.
cheating, right?
Yeah, that's like a fallback safety net. I don't know if I could do a TV show like this if I didn't have the fallbacks of Montana, just because I know I can get those tags. And then Utah, when I got back from Alaska, I found out that I drew the one non-resident archery tag for a very good mule deer unit. So the reason of bringing that up is if you want to hunt the West, as much as Matthew made a very valid point about these elaborate point schemes and how if you're just getting into it, you might want to look at how this is impacting, or what you're going to get as a bang for your buck. That's right?
Yeah, like I was saying, I would be ignoring all these units that took 25 years to get, and I would be finding that one state where I have a 75% chance of drawing, even if it's sparse animal numbers and
low success rates or whatever. Yeah, but and I bring this up just because now in May and June, by the end of June, we've found out about most of these states. And some of you listening to this, I'm sure if you're not familiar with how these Western states work, go out to Hunt Talk. We have a separate forum called Tags and Applications. And then go watch our Elk Talk series on YouTube. We talk about all these states and how you do this. Because if you don't have a tag, you're not going hunting. It's that simple. So
at least you're not legally going hunting, and we definitely cannot promote that.
No, you're not going hunting. You're going poaching if you do it.
You're probably going to jail. Actually,
hopefully hopefully you're going to jail if you do that. The last thing I want to talk about. I've been reading a book lately. I'm about halfway through it, and it's a pretty intense read. A lot of times I have to go back and read the paragraph or the page again. But it's called Hunting and the American Imagination. And it's about how hunting and our image as hunters was formed in America. So you take this group of Europeans who come to the United States. They interact with the indigenous people. You have all kinds of reasons about why people came to this country, religious freedoms, all kinds of other things. But history shows that there were some really interesting social norms back then that formed our hunting tradition and in what we think of ourselves as hunter and how we are viewed by others as hunters in this country. And so it's by Daniel Justin Herman. If you're really into history and hunting and culture and how cultures form and evolve, specific to ours, I mean, I love American history and I love hunting history, so maybe that's why this book is so cool to me. But the first half of it so far has just been, it's been so informative. And I don't know Daniel Herman, but boy, he did a good job on this. And if any of you, a lot of you email me and say, Randy, what have you been reading lately? And I read a lot of stuff, but it's only so often that I find something that's really helpful to my understanding of hunting and what I think is my responsibility of being a media platform in the hunting world. So anyhow, I don't know Daniel. I don't get any plug for his book, but Hunting and the American Imagination is the name of that book. If you get a chance and you want to read something that dives into this really deep, really heavy reading, get it. It'll occupy quite a few of your days. So, what do we got left, Matthew?
I think we just have a couple quick topics from the Hunt Talk forum of question and answer type stuff here.
Can we plow through them?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, let her rip.
So let's start with
and Matthew said these came from our Hunt Talk forum. We have a forum section out there called the podcast, questions, comments, ideas, topics. And so we just grabbed a few off there.
All right. What would you use first on a grizzly bear? Bear spray or a gun?
Not even a question. Bear spray. I'm terrible with a handgun, but I've had 2 really close grizzly encounters. And in both of them, if that bear had decided to come after me rather than run away from me or run off to the left or right, there is no way I could have got a handgun out in time. And even if I did, it would have been so chaotic and so fast that I don't. And that's just my anecdotal observations, but it's also a lot of research that says, you know what? The best defense you have is bear spray. And the only reason I'd carry a handgun is if the bear didn't kill me, I could finish myself off. And I know some of you are going to complain or email me and say that's BS, Randy. Well, the data shows otherwise. And if you come and hunt grizzly country, use bear spray.
Do you even own a handgun right now?
No, I don't right now, just because I'm that bad with them. I like shooting them, and I've got all kinds of companies offering to send them to me, but it's like, you know what? I got enough weight I'm carrying around with cameras and tripods and batteries and everything else. I don't need any more weight.
All right. Next question. Do you think Mom is ever going to be a guest either on the TV show or the podcast?
Oh, out on Hunt Talk, a lot of you, when I'm on the road, my wife, Kim, they call her Miss Finn because on the podcast I'm known as Big Finn. That started...
On the forum, you mean?
Oh, yeah, yeah, see, it's already getting late. On the forum, on the Hunt Talk forum. I go by the handle Big Finn. I've had that title forever just because of my Finnish heritage. So they call her Miss Finn. But nobody could, I'm struggling to think of an analogy of anyone who's as modest and bashful as your mother, my wife.
I don't have anything.
You don't have a comparative?
Nope.
Me either. So to whoever asked this question, the answer is you are not ever going to see my wife as a guest on the TV show, on our YouTube channel, and you're probably never going to hear her as a guest on this podcast. It's just, she is that humble, bashful, whatever you want to call it.
Can we get her in some cooking videos maybe?
We tried, but she refused. All you got to see was her hands. It's like, whatever. So,
all right. What do you do to stay in shape in the off season?
I'm one of those guys who I hate a gym. I would rather get put on the rack and tortured than to go to a gym. So I'm lucky I live next to a Forest Service trailhead here about a mile away. And I have yet to find anything that replicates elk hunting, like hiking the Gallatin Face up to the Highlight Divide and back. It takes me about 2.5 hours, and I can change the pace if I want more exercise. I can change the weight in my pack if I want more exercise. I don't know. I drive a desk for a living. I'm a CPA in my other life, so I have to make it part of my day. I have to make it a calendar item on my schedule that, okay, from this hour of the day to that hour, I'm going hiking. And I've yet to find anything that replicates elk hunting as good as hiking.
All right. Follow up to that.
Okay.
What do you have any special diets that you use? I know the Dairy Queen diet is very popular.
Yeah. Everyone knows Randy's a big fan of Dairy Queen, but that's probably not a good question for me to answer because I have a strange liver condition that if you go and look at season 1 of Fresh Tracks, the very first episode, we were in the Nevada Ruby Mountains and my liver flared up really bad. And we try to edit that out most of the time. Those of you in the medical profession are probably saying, well, what condition does he have? I don't have a portal vein. So if you go and Google the condition portal vein thrombosis, portal hypertension, that's the main vein that goes into your liver. Carries about 70% of your blood into your liver. So my blood doesn't get doesn't get cleansed. Best analogy I can use is if you ran your car for 100,000 miles and only put about 30% of the oil through the oil filter, your car's not going to make it 100,000 miles. So I have this weird dietary restriction. So I'm not the right guy to answer that question other than, yeah, I do treat myself to a medium vanilla cone every night in the summer.
All right. moving on. Shooting downhill and uphill. How do you adjust?
Yeah, it's well, the easy way is I have a Leupold rangefinder that already has it built in. It's a TBR. It gives your true ballistic range. In other words, those of you who study physics, you know that your line of sight, the hypotenuse of the triangle, is always longer than the horizontal distance over which gravity works on your bullet. So if you're shooting at a steep uphill angle or a steep downhill angle, you have to hold low from what your line of sight distance would be. In other words, if your line of sight, the hypotenuse of the triangle, would be 300 yards, the distance over which gravity works on your bullet is not the true 300 yards. It's the leg of the triangle. And so if you held for 300, you'd end up hitting high. So. All right. Always hold low, uphill or downhill.
Or use a Leupold true ballistic range.
Right. You get the Leupold 1200 TBR rangefinder, and that will solve all your problems.
All right. Have you ever considered hunting somewhere else besides the United States or North America?
I have. I want to go to New Zealand. We got a bunch of Kiwis out on the Hunt Talk website who have informed me that there is a lot of public land in New Zealand. So I want to go do that because it would be like what we do. People often ask me, you want to go to Africa? And it's nothing against Africa. It's just there's so much that intrigues me about North America and other places. Africa has not yet made it up that far up my priority list. So being of Scandinavian heritage, my dad's side being Finn and Swede, my mom's side having quite a bit of Norwegian in it, I really would love to go to Scandinavia hunting. So I would say if I ever leave this continent for my hunting, it's going to be Scandinavia.
All right. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up the quick Q&A from Hunt Talk.
Okay.
Anything else before we sign off for the night?
You got any parting thoughts? I always let the guest have the parting thought.
I think that as a general hunting group, we need to do a lot more to figure out what's preventing new hunters from entering, whether that's finding places to hunt, whether that's sifting through regulations, getting people through gun safety, anything like that. There's more interest than I think most people realize of people who haven't hunted traditionally trying to get into it. And I think we're doing a very poor job of making it accessible to them.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. You mentioned one thing about places to hunt. I'm going to wrap this up with those of you who follow all of my Facebook, other things, you know I'm a huge advocate for public lands. We just started yesterday. We launched a video on our YouTube channel called Stealing the Public Lands. And we're doing a whole series because there's this myth out there that somehow selling the public lands or transferring these public lands that are currently BLM and Forest Service lands, that somehow transferring those to the Western State Land Boards would be a good idea. That is one of the dumbest ideas that's ever been concocted if you're a hunter. It is an anti-hunting, anti-American idea if ever there was one. And some of you have argued that fact with me on Facebook or elsewhere. And so I've went and done, I think we've got 13 or 14 videos that will be rolling out in the next few months. And it's all the facts. These are citations. These are screenshots from all the pages. This is not Randy Newberg making this up. This is all fact, history, and everything else. And when it's all done, you're going to realize that this whole smokescreen about transferring to the states is nothing but an excuse for the fringe operators to not, in Congress, to not have to do their job. Everything we're pissed off about when it comes to public land management in the West, in this country, could be fixed by Congress, but they're too spineless to do it. So they come up with these jackass ideas that, oh, let's sell these lands to our buddies, or let's transfer them to the states because the states are really good at selling these lands to our buddies. So I'm going to leave you with, I hope you'll go out to our YouTube channel, subscribe to that channel. It's free. And you will follow this public land state transfer, sale of the public lands, whatever you want to call it, that you'll follow that video series. So anyhow, we've kept you guys for 2 hours. Holy cow, man. Thanks for giving us that much time on your birthday, Matthew.
Yeah, no problem. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. And thank all of you for listening. And I hope your mailbox gets stuffed full of tags in the next few weeks, in the next month. And I'm going to try adhere to Matthew's request and try to get these back on a weekly basis. So thanks for listening. 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 Listening.